It is time for Excuse Me, Doctor. Welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Melissa Clark. Of course, everybody calls me Dr. Mel. I am delighted to be back here with you again for another week of the show where we provide you with the health information that you need to make informed decisions for yourself, your family, and even your community. Thanks so much for tuning in, especially to my newbies who are listening for the first time. If this is your first time or even your 10th time and you have not yet hit the subscribe button on YouTube or the like button on Facebook, please do that right now. I really appreciate you for doing that. Thank you so much. And of course, because we are here to answer your questions, we hope that you are going to be putting your questions in the chat, throwing your opinions in there. We want to hear it all. So just go ahead and jump on into the discussion. And now let us get into creating an amazing week for ourselves with all the health topics that we're going to cover tonight. And of course, to do that, who has to be right here by my side? My road dogs, Miss Bria Good and Mr. Wayne Bruce.
Howdy.
Bringing
Hey.
the word from the street.
Bringing
Happy
something
Black
from
History
the street.
Month, y'all.
I guess it's just going to be the word from the street.
Just a word.
Is
The
Mercury
word,
in retrograde? Because, all kinds of things are happening over here, Dr. Mill.
No, I don't think you can blame it on that this time.
I can't blame it on Mercury in retrograde?
No,
not this time.
Not this time? Okay. I'll blame it on something. I can't blame it on the okay. I'm excited because we have a music guest this evening. Yeah. I'm excited.
Right. And he's probably plugging his ears right now as you sing. I'm just saying.
It's okay. We all got our strong suits and weaknesses.
So speaking of our guest, y'all know what we're talking about today, right?
Yeah, we're talking about autoimmune diseases.
We're talking about autoimmune diseases.
Yeah,
and some of the autoimmune diseases that you mentioned to me earlier, I didn't even know were autoimmune diseases. Just didn't know.
That's right. Crohn's disease, lupus, scleroderma, polymyositis, rheumatoid
arthritis. Didn't know.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking about them in general. Definitely, I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions to put in the chat. We have two amazing guests tonight. Renowned rheumatologist, that goes together, R&R. Renowned rheumatologist, Dr. Jeffrey Potter, and of course, legendary singer, Mr. Will Downing. So it's going to be
Come on now, legendary.
That's singer, nice.
Will Downing.
Absolutely.
Honored.
You almost got to say it like Don Cornelius.
Oh, which is?
Legendary singer, Will Downing.
Now, y'all don't go asking for him to say.
You guys get to talk to him first.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So, and I hope everybody is sharing this right now as we speak. Share, bring people in. Anybody that you know that would have questions or should have questions about this episode, share it so that they can get in on it too. So, all right.
Yeah. So let's get to the show. Let's get to the top of it. We start with all the news in the past week in health and wellness with the recap. The week that was.
There you go.
So Dr. Mel, give us an update on cold, flu, RSV, all the things, the triple-demic things that are happening now.
Well, we're not in a triple-demic anymore. We talked about that last week. Thankfully, even COVID cases are going down. The big news around COVID is that the public health emergency has an end date, which is May 11th. So, the public health emergency was what was declared at the beginning of this pandemic to make sure that everybody had access to healthcare, access to testing, vaccines, the whole nine, right? And so that's ending as of May 11th.
Wow. How do we feel about that? That's kind of scary. That means, will your test be able to get picked up, or,
You mean get tested for free?
getting tested for free?
Well, after May, there will be costs associated with things like COVID tests and COVID medications like Paxlovid, depending on whether you have Medicare, Medicaid, or whether you have commercial insurance. The other thing that's going to be affected too is telehealth.
So you mean I just can't Zoom my doctor anymore? Zoom call with my doctor and not go in the office?
You have to go in.
Yeah, no. Well, you should be going in for some things anyway. Let me just say that. I mean, like, your GYN exam cannot be done over Zoom. I'm just saying.
Neither can certain MEL exams. They can't be
neither that either. Exactly. But you still will be able to do telehealth. It's just that it might, what the public health emergency did was it allowed doctors from other states that weren't licensed in your state to do telehealth wherever, right? So some of those restrictions might be put back into place where you have to be licensed in the state where the patient is. So we're going to see, though, that might evolve, but as of right now, that's what's up.
Okay, cool. So what does that mean about COVID vaccines?
Well, there's still going to be vaccines available, even though the public health emergency ends, and it should be free as long as they're from the stockpile that the federal government has purchased. And so that's good news. We'll still have access to vaccines because we know that's one of the things that helped the number of cases to be going down, the number of hospitalizations, the number of deaths, all the wonderful things that are happening now. A lot of that's due to the availability of the vaccine. So that's definitely going to continue.
So what's that date again? I just want to know, what's the drop?
May 11, 2023. And the big thing too is a lot of people got insured under Medicaid because the regulations around, your income were raised so that more people could qualify for Medicaid. Well, that's going to end. So there are going to be a bunch of people. Yeah, there are going to be a bunch of people that need to go to the marketplace to purchase insurance at a discount based on their income who formerly had Medicaid. So that's important too.
It's giving access disparities.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Not at all. But hopefully people will be able to transition to something they can afford.
Make sure y'all stay insured, y'all. Insurance is real helpful.
Yes.
So I know we often talk about, 30 minutes a day keeps the doctor away, get your exercise in. So we have a new thing. What's this 9 more minutes?
So this is the deal. This new study came out that showed that if you just swap 9 minutes of sitting a day with moderate physical activity like brisk walking or bike riding, that was associated with better working memory and mental things like planning and organization that can sometimes kind of fall off as we get older, right? And it seemed to be especially true for people who sit a lot. So, and people that sit a lot at the computer or sit a lot at work or couch potatoes. So that's really an important thing that came out.
Oh, I feel like this is talking to me because I sit all day. My memory is like gone. I know I'm young, but my memory is gone. It's shot. But that essentially means like for everybody to take some short breaks after long periods, like a 10 brisk minute walk, short movements, anything like that, right?
Yep, exactly. Because it's great for brain health in the short term. So it improves your concentration when you come back to work. Plus, this study is showing it's good for long term too.
That's good. Okay. 9 minutes tomorrow. I'm gonna note that.
Yeah. There you go.
So look, I know a couple of friends of mine who still, it seems like we're forgetting that regular old colds are still around during this part. I mean, the threat of the new variants are always present, but a regular old cold, and it's tough to sleep with a cold, y'all. I mean, but you're saying you have better ways now to sleep better with a cold. You have a way to sleep better with a cold?
That is true. And first of all, if you do have cold symptoms, you should get tested for COVID, right? Because we're getting, if you've been vaccinated, it might be a very mild, symptoms, and you might mistake it for a cold. But once you know that you have a cold, there's some ways to improve your sleep. One is staying well hydrated. The other is cutting congestion down by using a neti pot or nasal irrigation. Do it with distilled water. Don't do it with tap water. That's not a good idea. And what it does is it lessens swelling in the nose that leads to that feeling of congestion. And it might also, some studies show it might shorten the duration of the illness and how contagious you are. So that's really key. The other thing is you can use a humidifier that soothes nasal passages. And also some studies have shown it cuts down on transmission of the virus, maybe to other family members.
What about over-the-counter medicines?
Well, there's some evidence that vitamin C, as in cat, zinc, and ginger have anti-inflammatory properties, especially when used at the very beginning of symptoms. But the research isn't conclusive. But it won't help it won't hurt to take those things. One natural remedy that did bear out was using 2 teaspoons of honey for a cough at bedtime. They tested that in kids age 1 to 5 and found that it was just as effective in reducing nighttime coughs and improving sleep as the drug dextromethorphan, which is found in a lot of over-the-counter cough syrups. So, honey. The
cool.
thing is, though, don't give it to kids who are under 1 year old. That's really important.
Okay. So while we have a cold, we just going to throw getting cavities out the window. You go give the kids some honey.
They should still be brushing their teeth.
Just for the night, Johnny. Just for the night. You have your honey. But go in there and brush your teeth. All right. I'm going to stop, Dr. Mel. I know I joke too much.
No, I mean, I believe that was an important point to make. Oral hygiene is very important.
Okay.
Don't forget to brush your teeth.
Don't forget. Hey, I'm out.
So, the girls, we love to get our nails done. And the guys too, we're not going to knock your struggle or your hustle, whatever it is. Go get your nails done. But the whole thing with gel manicures, is it worth it? Please tell me it is, because I love to get my nails done.
Well, I'm just saying you might have to rethink how you get the gel manicure, because there was a new study out this week that showed that the ultraviolet lamps that salons use to dry your gel nail polish, there might be a link to skin cancer of the hand. Yeah.
No. So is this the same UV light that they use in tanning beds that already kind of has that warning around skin cancer, right?
That is the very self-same UV light. And so what researchers saw were that the patterns of DNA damage that they see in people that already have skin cancer are the same patterns of DNA damage that happen with every exposure to a UV nail polish dryer.
Wow.
So you can either go back to just using regular old nail polish, or if you feel that you must have that gel manicure, you can air dry instead of using the UV dryer. Or dermatologists have said that you can use UVA, UVB sunscreen on your hands before you go for the nail for your manicure. But realize that that's not going to help the skin under the nail, right? Because obviously you're not going to be able to get the sunscreen there. So just remember, those are some of your options if you must get that manicure.
So I guess regular polish it is. I feel like everything leads to cancer, in my opinion. I feel like every time I turn around, something's cancerous.
Right. Well, not the regular old nail polish, and not the air drying.
That's the point.
And someone in the chat said, "What about the clip-ons? just clip them on." I'm going to stay out of the conversation, though.
There's that too.
You know what time it is, right?
What time is it?
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in the tracks.
All right. So the Twitter finger family is always fast at it every single week. They never let up. It's like their job. So Terry texted me this time around and said, my grandmother Tina Twitterfingers, not Tina Turner, Tina Twitterfingers, is 65 years old. And I told her what I heard, that COVID booster is giving older people strokes. So she's not going to pass. She's going to pass on that one. She's not going to get it. And, oh, I don't know about that one, Dr. Mel. Can you tell if that's true or not?
Well, this is the deal. I'm sorry to hear that Mrs. Tina is going to pass on it, because she really should get it, because people over 65 are at higher risk for COVID. We know this. What Terry might be referring to, though, is that there was one single vaccine database, where they report adverse events after vaccination. And it found that there was a possible link between the Pfizer bivalent, so that's the updated booster, and strokes, ischemic strokes in people over 65 within 3 weeks of getting the vaccine. So what they saw was, in this database of over 500,000 people over 65, 130 of them had a stroke within 3 weeks of taking the vaccine. Now, remember, we talked about these database reports. It doesn't necessarily mean that the vaccine led to it. It could be that there were other factors already in play, and that person was going to have a stroke regardless of whether they had the vaccine or not. So that number, 130 out of 550,000, translates to about 24 cases per 100,000, right?
Wow.
No one died. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But that's actually below the average incidence of stroke in the population, which is 38 cases per 100,000, right? So even though they saw this association, it was way less frequent than the rate that people just have strokes anyway, regardless of whether they've had a vaccine or not. And then the other thing is, there are these much larger worldwide databases and other US databases that have not shown the same thing. So they found no higher likelihood of strokes linked to the Pfizer bivalent vaccine. And the other thing, too, is Ms. Tina should know that the risk of stroke from getting COVID is twice as high when you compare it to the risk for the general population, and definitely higher than what they saw in this one database. So it's more dangerous to get COVID if you're worried about strokes.
There you go.
And then, and then finally, I just want to mention that there was a recent study that just came out this week from University of North Carolina that showed that all the new Omicron variants, BA 4.6, BA 5, BQ, the BBQ band, all of those, that those the vaccine, the updated vaccine, is effective in still preventing hospitalization and death. It's more effective than the original vaccine, and that was in data from over 2 million North Carolinians over age 12. Booster effectiveness peaked at about 4 weeks and then waned afterwards to about 62% in effectiveness. So important to know, it's effective and it's safe.
Good. There you go. And there you have it.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much, Bria. Thank you, Wayne. We are going to see you back shortly, because we are now going to talk about autoimmune disease. Everything y'all wanted to know. I know we all know somebody who has lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or type 1 diabetes or gout or Crohn's disease. The list goes on and on. But what is autoimmune disease exactly? What causes it? How do you treat it? How do you live with it? We have two guests today who are going to break this topic down for us. First of all, we have Dr. Jeffrey Potter. He's a board certified internal medicine physician and rheumatologist. He's a member of the American College of Rheumatology. His areas of interest include rheumatoid arthritis, gout, myositis, we're going to find out what that is, and systemic lupus. And for those of you Howard University folks listening, he is a proud graduate of Howard University College of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Potter.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Mel. I definitely appreciate being here.
All right. And you said to call you Jeff. I'm going to call you Dr. Jeff, if that's okay.
Dr. Jeff works.
All right. And then we also have the incredible, legendary singer, Mr. Will Downing. the studio. Thanks for joining us, Will.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Glad to be here. I'm normally here joking around with you guys, being someone who's just watching the show and sending in jokes. Now you got me on the hot seat. I'm in
That's
the heat
right.
now.
That's right. So hopefully there's nobody out there who's going to be sending in jokes tonight.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure.
Well, good. Well, let's get into it. I'm going to start with you, Will. I know, people know you for your wonderful career, but you're here for a very different reason tonight. Can you tell us about your journey with autoimmune disease? What was your diagnosis, and how did it affect you when you first learned?
Well, I learned about my autoimmune disease in 2006. I had gone to South Africa to go do a series of shows. And when I came back, I felt like what I had was almost like the flu. But then I started slowing down. Basic things that people take for granted, putting a belt on, getting up out of a chair, combing my hair, shaving, all of these things have become increasingly difficult. And I did not, as a lot of people of color, especially men, don't do. I didn't go to the doctor. So it got progressively worse. I ended up losing weight at a very rapid pace. And it got to the point where I just had to go and go get checked out. I had gone to an urgent care place and they took my blood and they sent me home. And by the time I got home, they had a message on my machine saying, I need you to go to the hospital. If you can't make it on your own, call an ambulance, or as Black folks say, ambulance.
Wow.
And and have them and I knew something was really wrong. And I got to the hospital and they did all kind of tests on me. And basically the next day, I was pretty much paralyzed.
Wow. Over what time period, from the time you first felt symptoms to the time you ended up in the hospital almost paralyzed? Tell us what time frame that was. Was it days, weeks?
It would have to be probably 6 to 8 months. I'd
Okay.
gone where I was just really slowing down at this rapid pace. And then finally I was on stage. I was in Chicago. I'll never forget it. I was at a place called the Park West Theater. And we were on stage and we have like a little dance routine that we would do on stage. We do the kid and play, me and my road manager at the time. And then my road manager was like trying to get me to dance. I was like,
it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm looking at him on stage saying, can't, not, ain't gonna happen. And then finally I felt so weak that I finally just had to announce to the audience. I said, hey, I'm really not feeling very well. And, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to sing. And I finished the show. And then once again, I did not go to the doctors like when I should have right there at that moment. Instead, I jumped on a plane and flew home. And when I got home, I could barely get in the car. I think my wife had to grab my bag and put it in the car. And even then, I waited like another week. And then I finally, it was absolutely ridiculous.
You just thought you were going to get better on your own, huh?
Well, yeah, I thought I was going to do what Chris Rock said, put some tussin on it. If I said some tussin,
wow.
Eventually, I was going to feel better, but no, it didn't quite work out that way for me. But
so what was your diagnosis? What did they tell you was wrong when you got to the hospital?
Well, they thought it was everything but what I had. And then I basically became like a pincushion for them to find out what it was. So they had done like electric shock therapy. They put the thing on you, say, can you feel this? And like the little needles would hit you and say, okay, I feel that. So, okay, well, it's probably not that. We had done all kind of testing and they thought it was Guillain-Barré. That was one. Then they thought it was Lou Gehrig's disease. They thought it was that. And of course, I got nervous about that because I heard that there was no cure for that. And so they went down a litany of things and they took blood and we took tests. And eventually they kind of narrowed it down to polymyositis.
Polymyositis. Wow. So Dr. Potter or Dr. Jeff, I'm going to bring you in here. What is polymyositis? Can you tell us why it affected Will like that?
Yeah, it's an amazing story that you were even able to maintain as long as you did. That's a very long course of time to have that type of diagnosis, and you're young for it. It sounds like there are most of the patients that we look at with that disorder, they tend to be later in life, so 70s, sometimes 60s, but usually 60s, 70s, 80s, and it can be it can look a bit more more gradual in that population because they may not be as active. They're definitely not on stage performing and dancing and like what you were doing. But it is a disorder that affects muscle groups throughout the body. And there are lots of blood tests that you can do to kind of evaluate it and see what exactly is going on. But it can be confusing to figure out to start. Primarily what's going on there is that the immune system, which is responsible for fighting off infection and fever and cancer and viruses and bacteria, all of these things for you, it actually turns all of those resources inward and targets your own muscles. It causes inflammation, causes swelling, causes damage, and leaves you feeling the way that you felt when you weren't able to get done your normal, regular, everyday activities. It's one of those things that when we see it, it not only gives us concern for muscle injury, but also for other things that can go along with it. Oftentimes, malignancies or cancers can be associated with muscle disease or myositis. And so that too might have been part of that huge workup the docs were doing for you, making sure there weren't other things going on that might be present underneath the muscle disease. But it's rare, it's uncommon. It's of the diseases that we see in rheumatology, and most of the things that we treat are relatively rare. That one is rarer than most. We don't see that as often as gout. We don't see it as often as we see rheumatoid disease. It's an uncommon disorder. So it's good that they were able to get some information even after that extended period of time where you weren't well.
So you had to be the one in a million, huh? Well,
I was going to say, how lucky am I? Wow. I buy a lottery ticket once a week. Nothing. Myositis. Who gets it?
Right. So you mentioned, in rheumatology. Can you tell us what is a rheumatologist? What do you do? Why do you know about all these things?
Oh wow, that's a tough one. I know why I do it. I know why I got into it, and I can kind of tell you how people think of it generally. So when I meet people and they come to see me, they often don't know why, and they'll say, "Oh, my doctor said I had some blood work that didn't look well, or I had a joint that was swollen, or I had this funny skin rash. We couldn't really figure it out." A lot of providers, when they're thinking of rheumatologists, they think of us as kind of the Sherlock Holmes or the detectives of internal medicine. Whereas once you're actually seeing patients and looking at disease states over and over again, there's a relatively common thread that runs in all of the diseases that we treat. So the immune system is the problem with most of these things. And like I mentioned before, it's supposed to be protecting you, but for autoimmune disorders and folks who have them, those tools are all turned inwards in towards the body. And so for diseases like psoriasis, that looks like skin rashes. For lupus, patients can be affected by kidney disease or lung disease. Patients with myositis, like Will, are going to have muscle involvement and damage or inflammation to those parts of the body. And then you can also see other things like scleroderma that can affect lots of different places like skin, lungs, kidneys. It's a pretty angry looking thing when you see it at times. But in general, autoimmune disorders are states where the body's fighting itself.
Now, Will mentioned something. He said at the very beginning of his illness, he felt like he had the flu.
Yeah.
Can you connect that to what eventually happened with his immune system basically turning on his muscles, and
Sure.
sort of connect that in general to why autoimmune diseases may happen in the first place?
Sure. So it kind of makes sense in terms of those symptoms, right? Because the way that you feel when your body's fighting the flu, it's hard to distinguish that from how it feels when it's fighting you. It's using all those same tools in terms of letting different mediators into your bloodstream and how those can affect different organs. In terms of flu and other viruses and their impact on autoimmune diseases, we're not 100% sure why one person versus another gets an autoimmune disorder, but we do know that there's a genetic component that's involved. There are some environmental exposures or agents that can actually be implicated in autoimmune disorders. But viruses and infections are very oftentimes the trigger or the starting point for autoimmune disorders. And we don't always know why, and we don't always know which bugs are causing which problems, but we see it often enough that we look out for it, that infections can often precede or come before the onset of symptoms of an autoimmune disorder.
Mm-hmm. So Will, I'm going to go back to you. So you're in the hospital. You're almost paralyzed. I take it because you're so weak that you
Mhm.
can't do all the things. What were some of the treatments that you got that eventually led to your recovery?
Well, we started off, I mean, with the go-to for in most cases, and I'm sure the doctor will back me up on it, is prednisone.
Yeah.
So they had me on large doses of prednisone. And we did that for a certain amount of time until the body sort of rejected that. And then we went to methotrexate. Then we went to something called IVIG, or I guess a more technical term was a gamma globulin, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we went to a cancer drug called Rituxan.
Wow.
And Rituxan was the thing that kind of worked for me. So what I found with other people that have polymyositis, and I talk to a lot of folks because they reach out to me and they say they see how I recovered and they're looking for any kind of hope, the same way that I did. When I had it, I was reaching out to people, had my family doing research, and and I would see someone who made it. I said, well, reach out to them and ask them what they took, ask them what they did, what was the regimen. But it's a different cocktail for every person. It's not going to be the same consistent thread that works with everyone. So for me, it was a cancer drug called Rituxan, and that had reduced my numbers back to a point where at least I felt like a human being. Um,
Yeah.
when I,
And
yeah,
you were so sick, they had to put you on a breathing machine to breathe for you, right? Because you
well,
didn't have the energy to
they had
breathe
to
for
put me on
yourself.
everything to do everything. So I was on
Yeah,
a breathing
yeah.
machine. Um, Obviously, I caught everything under the sun because my immune system was very compromised. So when I was in the hospital, I ended up getting pneumonia a couple of times. So it was one of those things where I'd had so much phlegm in my system at one time that they had kind of like, well, if he can't cough it up, you know, this very well could be it for him. And luckily, they gave me some antibiotics, and it worked, and that cleared itself up. But all of this is all taking place over the course of like a year and a few months. So I
Mhm.
spent probably about 8 months in the hospital,
Wow.
and about 4 months at home in my office, which we had kind of put a hospital bed in there and everything that you could imagine. And I still can't walk. Like, just remember, I can't do anything. So
Right.
basically, if I got to go to the bathroom, I'm like, hey, can somebody, and
Yeah.
two people come and they put me on a potty. I hadn't seen a bathroom in a year.
Wow.
And then when I certain things just started happening. Certain things that I couldn't do maybe a week before, all of a sudden came back. Like I wasn't
Right.
able to move my hand completely, and all of a sudden I'd be able to move my hand. I said, "Oh, okay, couldn't do that before." And then slowly but surely things started coming back. But then I
Wow.
had to do months and months and months of rehab to,
Yeah.
Sure.
to learn how to do everything again, how to talk again, how to
Yeah.
walk, how to everything. So
How to
I
sing.
literally crawled,
Yeah.
yeah, literally crawled and then started taking baby steps, and then we started walking, but all this with a walker and with people around me and with healthcare workers, helping me basically every day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I thank God. I thank the
Thank
people
God.
that
Yes.
God put into my life. These people would come on their days off to come
Mm.
do rehab with me every day.
That's
So I'm one
amazing.
of the fortunate ones.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so Dr. Jeff, talk to us a little bit about, you don't have to tell us about what each of the drugs do, but what was the whole point of going through those drugs? What were they trying to get to happen for Will in terms of
Yeah.
helping him improve?
You're trying as best you can to initially suppress the immune system and then hopefully give it time to reset. So the medicines that you were offered, believe it or not, are not strict treatments or cures for muscle disease. Just like you mentioned, the rituximab is initially a cancer drug. We don't have FDA approved medicines for muscle disease. And so, really, what we're trying to do is shut off your immune system with groups of other medicines that have other uses in other spaces in an attempt to kind of slow things down enough where you're not having organ failure or having lung failure and respiratory failure, that kind of thing. Steroids are usually a starting point because they're just so powerful and they work so quickly. But, and I'm sure the docs walk you through this, that you can only use big doses of steroids for so long because they have their own complicated set of side effects. And believe it or not, if you use enough of them for long enough, they can cause muscle weakness. And so that can also complicate a myositis kind of picture. Methotrexate's a medicine that we use more commonly for rheumatoid disease, rheumatoid arthritis. But in the setting that you found yourself in, they were more than likely trying to reduce the amount of steroids that you needed to keep you as healthy as you possibly could. IVIG is a medicine that we use more commonly. There was a period of time, and it's still a little bit hard to get, but as recently as 2-3 years ago, you really could not find IVIG in any abundant supply. And there were lots of patients with muscle disease who really just kind of had to cross their fingers and wait for supplies to be available.
Wow.
And yeah, and rituximab is a medicine. You mentioned it's a cancer medicine. We use it for lupus in some situations. We use it for muscle disease when we have to, for folks with severe symptoms like yourself. But it's a medicine that targets a specific part of the white blood cell that produces antibodies. And we think that by using it, what we're doing is shutting off the inflammation process and allowing your body to recover. But none of the medicines that we talked about, or none of the medicines that you were offered, are actual cures from myositis. Really, what we're doing is trying to slow things down enough so that your body can help to recover on its own and hopefully put you in a period of remission where you're not having disease activity. But it doesn't guarantee it's gone for good. Unfortunately, we're not quite that far ahead in our learning yet.
Right.
So is it fair to say that there are no cures for autoimmune disease in general? Is that a fair thing to say across the board?
It is, unfortunately so, yeah.
Yeah, but there are new. What's that?
I said, gee, thanks. Great.
The better news, I should say, Will, is that even though these diseases are rare, and even though they are complicated and difficult to treat, there is so much attention being paid to these things these days that there are new medicines being developed on I'd say a quarterly basis. When I'm asked to review a medicine or look at a medicine, literally every couple of months, there's a new medicine that's helpful for these disease states. So as recently as, and I don't want to age myself too much here, but as recently as my first couple of years in med school, we would give people things like steroids and huge doses of anti-inflammatories. We used to give people gold shots, believe it or not, shots of real gold in your buttocks for autoimmune disorders. And that was what we had to offer people. And now I've got anywhere between 30 to 50 drugs that I can use pretty confidently to get the kind of results that we're looking for. And that's a space of no more than 20, 25 years. So things are getting better. Things are definitely getting better.
A lot of those medications we've heard of on TV because of the commercials, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you give us a couple examples and how they work different than others?
Yeah, so some of the newer ones you've probably heard of. Humira is the best-selling drug in the whole world. So people use that for rheumatoid disease, for psoriasis. They use it for things like ankylosing spondylitis, which is a arthritis that affects the spine of young people. Use it for certain skin disorders as well. The thought behind the newer medications is that they're more targeted. They look for one particular problem in the immune system and address that one molecule. And by doing that, you can limit the amount of side effects that you see for medicines like prednisone. Prednisone, even though it's good and works quickly, it's just too powerful a drug and affects too many parts of the body negatively to use it long term. But some of these newer medicines that we see on TV, we've had patients using them since the late 90s, early 2000s, so about 20 years now, and doing well.
And are there certain autoimmune diseases, Dr. Jeff, that we see more in African Americans, and why?
Great question. I'll pick out a couple that are relatively easy to answer, and then some of the others we don't have perfect information, so it's harder to say. Lupus, systemic lupus, which is an autoimmune disorder that can affect any part of the body that it decides to, including the skin, the hair, the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, the joints. That disorder, when it is seen in African American populations, is significantly more severe than it is in other populations and harder to treat than it is in other populations. And there's lots of different things that go into that. Some of that's a genetic predisposition, but some of that is also driven by access to care that's different among different demographics of patients. And so the later you come to medical attention, the harder it is to treat some of these disorders. So when I see, particularly, I guess a good example, if I see young male patients with lupus, I worry about that patient a lot, because that patient, for whatever reason, tends to be sicker than someone else that may have skin rashes and fatigue and joint pain, but otherwise is able to function pretty readily. Other medication, other disorders that we treat, rheumatoid disease, not much of a difference that I see among my patient population in terms of demographic differences. Scleroderma, just about anyone can get scleroderma, and there are differences among races there, but those are a little bit less distinct than the lupus phenomenon. But you can certainly, these are rare diseases, but you can see them in any population. You should never discount the idea that a disease is there because of a person's background, because anybody can get these disorders.
I lost audio.
I did as well.
Okay, I said my hearing is going too.
Okay,
No.
my bad. Okay, you should be able to hear me now. So I was saying I want to get this last question.
No,
you're
not my hearing too.
No, I want to get this last question in before we take audience questions. Are there lifestyle changes that you've made, Will, since your amazing recovery that have kept you well, gotten you back to singing and keeping up the schedule that I know you have?
Well, I certainly changed my diet considerably. As the doctor said, my rheumatologist likened my disease to something that I ingested. And when I was in South Africa, and not to blame anything, I didn't take any of the shots, and I did all the safari stuff. I was eating everything under the sun because I wanted the experience, and I'd been there a few times. And I was like, I'm just going to go and just, and really enjoy myself and take it all in. And my body wasn't ready for that. So I changed all of that. And what I try to do now is I try to pace myself. I was running at a pretty good clip in 2000, the early 2000s up until I got sick. I was running pretty good. And everyone had told me, my mom especially had said, you need to slow down, take it easy. Work ain't everything, money ain't everything. And I was on a chase.
Wisdom.
Yeah,
I was on a big time chase. So, I've kind of balanced out my life. I don't say yes to every show that comes up. I only kind of work on the weekends, and I kind of chill during the week. So I really pace myself. And literally, as the doctor said earlier, you never fully recover from this thing. It's not like, I was sick and now I'm 100% better. I still feel the effects of it. I still, I map my day out. If I know that I have a busy schedule, kind of like, okay, I need to take a break in between, take 30 minutes, take a nap, just chill, sit down, let my muscles recover. Because still what happens to this day with the autoimmune disease is, I still feel my muscles kind of like, getting real tight, and that's what slows me down. So I kind of take it easy, let my muscles relax, let my mind relax as well. And then I get on with my day. So literally my day is like mapped out. It's one of those things where you can't just walk up to me and say, hey man, let's go for a long ass bike ride. Like, nah, I got a show later. I got to chill.
Yeah.
I can't eat everything that everyone else eats. So, it's really a lifestyle change.
Yeah. So really getting to know your body. Wow. Well, I have 1,000 other questions, but I got to get the audience in. So Bria and Wayne, please come on back. Let us know what's going on in the chat and what folks are asking.
Yeah. The chat is on fire, on fuego.
Yes.
It is incredible. Bria, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. The first question is, are all autoimmune diseases genetic?
To the best of our knowledge, there's a genetic component to most, right? There are some diseases that we treat that are genetic, but don't necessarily involve your immune system. So one very common one is gout. So we often think of that as being an inflammation-related thing, and sometimes that gets confused as an autoimmune thing. But what's really happening is that your body has a hard time processing waste. And that builds up in your bloodstream, and that turns into a crystal, and that causes joint pain and swelling. It's not a never scenario, but it's uncommon to find a person that has gout that doesn't have gout somewhere in their family tree ahead of them. And so that one has a pretty strong genetic predisposition. The others are so rare. I see you in the corner down there. The others are relatively rare. And so it's harder to make that distinction across the board. Some of these disorders, like myositis is a good one. That's probably less than 0.03% of the population that gets affected. That's extraordinarily rare. And so you can get that, right? You can get that and not have anybody in your family who's ever had it. But we still do think that if you've got multiple folks in your family who've been affected, it's more likely that you'll be affected as well. I hope that answers the question.
It does, definitely. Yeah. Thank you.
We have a question, and I just want to thank you. I was just trying to be transparent with our audience that, hey, I suffered from gout. In my family, I have a family history of my brother suffered from gout, my mother suffered from gout, my grandmother suffered from gout. I mean, it goes back a lot. So I just want my dad suffered from gout. Yeah, I guess it's in the DNA. I guess I got lucky. Great family.
So you're not alone. I'm waiting my turn soon. Same story for me. Everybody I can think of in my family was affected by gout. So it's coming sooner or later, but I'm doing my best.
Wow. So we have a question from Michelle Webb. She asks, what can you take to build up your immune system?
Question.
That's a really good. That was for me.
Yes, that is for you. Yeah.
So, that's a really good question. The best thing to do is, and some of this we'll touch upon. So avoiding toxins, so things like particulate matter, things like tobacco smoke are horrible for autoimmune diseases. Believe it or not, and Will went into really great detail about this, and I forgot to mention it all. Stress is a huge thing that you can do to reduce the incidence of autoimmune disorder. So you mentioned being on the road and taking shows and being on the grind and not really having time to take time for yourself. Your body has a hard time distinguishing between the stress of a heart attack or the stress of a stroke or the stress of a surgery or an infection. And if you're doing too much, it's going to let you know. And one of the ways it does that is the development of these disorders. So making sure you get good sleep hygiene, making sure you're regularly physically active, maintaining a good diet, and avoiding tobacco use are great ways, things that we know of that we can address that can help to reduce the incidence of these disorders.
Wow. That's good. Bree.
Gotcha. So the next question, also for you, Dr. Jeff. So a couple of people in the chat talked about their autoimmune disorders. And one person had said that they had polymyositis since 2004. And another person mentioned that they had CRPS/RSD. You might have to explain what that is. Yeah. But both were wondering if there were any new medications for those diseases.
Great question. So polymyositis, Will definitely gave us a great description of how that looks in some patient populations. And the medications that he went through, they do represent the newest medicines that we have. So rituximab we've been using in that disorder probably close to 10 to 15 years and having some success there, but still not 100% on our way to a cure. And since then, there have been some breakthroughs, but nothing really to speak of, or nothing that we're using widely for this patient population. CRPS is it's complex regional pain syndrome. And in my practice, I don't think of it as much as an autoimmune disorders. You may speak to some neurologists and they might give you a different description of their thoughts of it, but we generally don't treat that one as an immune system issue. At least we don't use the same medicines that we use to treat people who have immune dysregulation, we cause it. CRPS tends to occur in patients that have had an injury. So whether that's a car accident or a trauma or a surgery, and what happens is they develop in one of their extremities a limited ability to sweat. They have difficulty controlling their temperature in that part of their body. So they may be extremely hot or extremely cold. They can lose hair in that part of the extremity. They can have color changes as well. But as far as we know and the way that we manage it, it's seen as a nerve disturbance or a nerve disease. And we don't have great medicines for that. I'll be really honest with you. It's really hard to diagnose. We don't have great methods of diagnosing it, and a lot of patients affected by it, and the person raising the question may have some familiarity here. It may take 5, 7, 10 years to figure out what's going on in that disorder, because we just don't have great ways to distinguish it from other things that cause nerve problems.
Wow. So I have a question from myself. And this is for Will. I am, for those who don't know, I am in the entertainment industry and music also. And that lifestyle, and I've known Will for a number of years. Been fired more than any other band member.
I knew you were going to say it. I knew. I was like,
I'm the most fired member.
He's going to let it slide. No.
But when you got the diagnosis, how hard has it been to really talk about a lot of entertainers and a lot of people in our business don't like to talk about their diseases or things that affect them. What makes you want to talk about this?
Well, great question.
My personal take on it is we have this celebrity for a reason. We have a far reach, and there are certain things that Black people in general. I would say people of color, but I know about Black folks. Black folks don't like to talk about certain things, and health is one of them. So if I'm not here to inform someone, then what the hell am I here for? I think God saved me for a reason. And that was one of the things that when I was negotiating my deal to kind of get back to who I am with him, I was like, I'll spread the word. I'll do what I have to do to inform folks and to help people. That's what we're here for. That to me, that's what the celebrity status is. So, I'm here to talk about it. I'm here to help someone else because someone helped me. If I didn't hear about someone's good news, mentally I was jacked up because they told me, they said, listen, you have a year to 5 years. If you get to past that year, if you're not improved within 5 years or pretty much a year or two, like that's who you're going to be. That's what you're going to be. If you can't walk within a certain amount of time, you're never going to walk again. If this doesn't happen between a certain amount of time, it's never going to happen. And it worked out for me because I saw someone who kind of recovered or was on the road to recovery within 2 years. And like this person meant everything in the world to me. So I think that I should be that to someone else. I'm sure there's someone else who's out there who said they have polymyositis. They may look at me and I'm their hope. So I'm not going to act like it didn't happen. It happened to me. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow. What a testimony.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
What an amazing testimony. And let me say, thank you for not reneging on your promise to God.
Yeah. Listen, I saw what happens when you do say like after you drink a whole lot or something like that, you party, Lord, if you get me better. I'm never going to do it again. And next week you do it again. I said, in this case, I'm going to keep my promise on this one. I got you, God. And he had me, so I got him, and I got everyone else who's listening who needs help.
That is
beautiful.
beautiful.
Testimony.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite artists to play with, and one of my favorite people in the world, Will Downing.
Man, thank you. And the feeling's mutual. And hey, man, my condolences, in regards to your dad, man. He was my man. I love you, man, and I saw you put in some real work, and that's what you were supposed to do. So,
right,
I'm here to talk about that as well. So,
there we go. There we go. We got to help everybody in this situation. And Dr. Jeff, I'm coming back.
Hey, Jeff, Dr. Jeff, we heard him. So it's going to happen.
Right. I believe it when I see it. I believe it when I see it.
Okay. Just in the chat, we had incredible Miss Melba Moore say, amen, Will.
All right.
Legendary. Yeah.
Legendary.
Well, I take it from the fact that you are not asking any more questions, that you're telling me it's time to wrap up.
No.
Or do we
have
one more question?
One more question, Bree.
We got time for one more? Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, I'll make this question quick because I was going to ask about how to build awareness. But, we talked a little bit about sharing people's stories. So thank you for talking about that, Will. And the last question I wanted to ask, we always talk about natural remedies, because a lot of people don't really like to use medications. And we talked a lot about medications over the show. So I was just curious if there are any natural remedies. Well, I know you talked about you changing your lifestyle in different ways. So just wondering if there were other things to consider or contribute to your lifestyle for people who have autoimmune diseases.
It's a great, between me and the doctor, I guess we can, yeah.
But you know what? Let you go first, because you're looking great. You look like you're doing whatever you're doing is working for you.
Well, I'm gonna take this mask off after we finish doing this. Well, I mean, what I've always heard and what I try to do is try to stay away from foods that are what they call anti-inflammatory foods. You know, certain things that you can ingest that don't help your case in any way, shape, or form. So kind of cut back on the sugars, try to cut back, on the wheat. For some people, I went on a gluten-free diet for a good period of time, and it made me feel incredible. So, things like that, read up on your disease. If you're not feeling well, and there's certain things that we're all doing that you should not be doing in any case, that you should just sort of back off of. And I'm sure the doctor can give you some more technical aspects of where I'm going anyway. So, go ahead, take it, Dr. Jeff.
I'm glad you did say those things. Unfortunately, particularly in this country, we don't spend a lot of time talking about those things, right? We're always talking about diagnostics and screening and what medicines you should take. But for whatever reason, we have not invested enough in the actual things that you're putting into your body every single day. The things that you mentioned certainly are things that I've seen in my practice that have been helpful. So I have lots of patients who tell me that when they remove gluten from their diet, whether they have a gluten allergy or not, they feel better. Patients who remove sugar from their diet and they feel better. People who take cumin and turmeric and ginger, who take these medicines and they have fewer flares. And I never discount that stuff. I never say, I don't know what you're talking about, because too many people come in and they say those things and they're absolutely helpful. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't spend enough of our dollars investigating things that will be helpful in preventing those types of disorder. A lot of the money in this country from pharma and from other sources go into drug creation. And so I think that that's a very fruitful field that could be investigated further, things that we need to look further into. But the things that you've mentioned are things that have made sense in my practice as well.
Great. Wow. Well, thank you. I'm so glad that we got that aspect of it in, because I think that's absolutely crucial. In my book, Excuse Me, Doctor, I have a whole chapter on, blending the best of alternative medicine where there is evidence with, traditional Western medicine. So I'm really glad we got that in. And I have to just thank you all. You have been a wealth of knowledge and transparency and openness. And thank you so much, Mr. Will Downing, Dr. Jeffrey Potter, and of course, thank you to Bria and Wayne. Great show. I just want to wrap up by reminding my Be Health Empowered family about a special research study that's going on at Howard University. They've asked me to invite people who listen to the show to participate in this COVID resilience research study, just filling out 2 surveys about your experiences during COVID. You can get up to $100 reimbursement in the form of a gift card. So if you have any interest, reach out to Dana Harvey Research at gmail.com. That's Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, H-A-R-V-E-Y, research at gmail.com. That's it for us this week. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to my Be Health Empowered family. Y'all had great questions. And remember, until I see you again, be wise, be well, and be health empowered.
She thank Robinsons. They still don't know. I hooked up with Dave 3 days ago. He'll start coughing tomorrow. And I bet in 10 days he'll be on a ventilator. Now his wife, she's not vaccinated because she thinks it'll prevent her from being pregnant. But what they don't know is that I can decrease sperm count. Sorry, Dave.